Oh, we're on. Hello. Hare Krishna. What a surprise. Caught me off guard. So, today's Tuesday. It's Sunday. We had our first sexual purity seminar for men in Alachua. It was phenomenal. Phenomenal. And all you men who didn't come out there, you really missed out big time. I feel really sorry for you. And hopefully next time you can come. And of course I don't really feel sorry for you. You're probably doing okay, but it was very helpful. And one of the things that came up I just wanted to talk about, because we've been talking a lot about women and women's roles and how it seems that women are in an inferior position, at least according to the Vedic Shastra. Then they should be obedient to their husbands, and husbands kind of rule the family and so forth. So one of the things that came up in my mind is this theme that we find throughout the Bhagavatam and generally in Vedic literature about chastity of woman. And just like for a disciple wants to be chaste to the vows he makes to his guru. So the idea is a woman, her goal in life, at least in the Vedic culture, her highest dharma was to be a devoted wife, chaste to her husband. So I began thinking, it's interesting now in the present age that chastity is really more of a problem for men than it is for women, because men are the ones who really have more problem being monogamous. They're the ones who tend to cheat more on their wives than the women cheat on their husbands. So then I began thinking, well, maybe we need to be talking more about male chastity, because we never use that word, do we? We never say, men be chaste husbands. Uddhava, have you ever heard that? Anybody said no? Uddhava says no. And he's been around a long time, since he was born. And no one has ever talked about being chaste as a man. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think more so that even than women in this age, men need to be chaste husbands. And part of what we talked about in the sexual purity seminar was just about the nature of men. It's funny, I don't know if all you women know this, but it's funny, but it said sometimes a man will be walking with his wife and he'll see another attractive woman and he'll be distracted by her, even though his wife's right next to him. Or even that woman is walking with her husband. It's the way men are wired. So men are really challenged to be chaste. And just the fact that they get so easily distracted means they need to try that much harder to be chaste, because that kind of distraction is a symptom, or is not a symptom, but it is an actual act on some level of subtly being unchaste to one's wife, to think about another woman in any way. So that was an interesting point that kind of entered my mind and kind of balanced this discussion here, because in our discussions we'll hear a lot about this chastity of womanhood. So I just want to throw that out and welcome. Let's see who's here. Virgil Manjesh, thank you. Kremlin, our old faithful. And Nityananda Chandra, first time, isn't it? Or a long time. And Amanda. And many others. If you're out there and you want to join chat, you can see what's going on in the world of chat. Just click on chat below my picture. And Bhakti and Carol, she's here. Is it? Yeah, live chat room. You see that? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. And last week we had a lot of discussion about what I can't remember, but I know we had a lot of discussion. Uddhava, what were we talking about last week? Oh, Uddhava was in here. We were talking about how in the Bhagavatam it appears that even in the spiritual world the women are taking a secondary position, and we were addressing that. At least for some it appears that way. So I'm going to read a little bit of what we read last week, and then we'll discuss it. And this is a response to that. And this question came up in reference to a verse which said the inhabitants of Vaikuntha and their consorts fly in these transcendental airplanes, but it made it seem like the consorts were on a little lower level than their husbands. So, an observant reader would not fail to notice this deep respect and importance given to women in the pages of the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So, we've been discussing the point of that on the spiritual platform. Number one, equality is just not based on position, and not everybody is striving to be equal externally, because everyone has a particular relationship with Krishna in which they're satisfied, and they're not trying to outdo one another, rather they're trying to outdo serving one another. But here, at this point, we're getting into the idea of the respect that Bhagavatam gives to women. So it looked like in this passage they were being disrespected. So this point is made. We find powerful statesmen and world emperors such as Arjuna and Maharaj Yudhisthira giving considerate time and deliberation to the special interests of the women in society and the irreparable social consequences of neglecting their needs. If it should be considered that those performing the role of housekeeping, raising and training God-conscious children, protecting family tradition, and offering much-needed support for the men constitute subordinate, unimportant roles, such an outlook reflects inequality, unimportant roles. Such an outlook reflects inequality in fact, because we are relegating these most... so what he's saying is, if you think that those are the roles of someone inferior, it's just that you're relegating those roles to an inferior position in comparison to what men do. But it's not that those roles really are inferior, and therefore the person whose duty it is to perform those or to act within those roles is not inferior. So it's bringing in a concept that those activities are inferior, and therefore the person who does them is inferior. Very good point, isn't it? You all agree that's a good point? I think it is. I didn't make the point. I wish I was smart enough to make it. Ramapada Swami made the point. That's a very good point. But now I can make the point in the future, and people will think I'm smart. So, even if I'm not smart, they'll think I'm smart, so I'm happy. If you're not smart, listen to somebody who is, and then you'll sound smart, and you'll say something smart. Okay. If it should be considered that those performing the role of housekeeping, raising and training God-conscious children, protecting family tradition and offering much-needed support for the men constitute subordinate, unimportant roles, such an outlook reflects inequality. In fact, because we are relegating these most crucial services to a denigrated position. This is not the outlook of the Bhagavatam, for if it were, so there would not be so much concern, there would not be so much concern expressed for their welfare. In other words, the Bhagavatam is very concerned about protecting women, because when we say protected, it means keeping the family solid, men protecting women, women being devoted to their families. Bhagavatam is very concerned about that. And how are they concerned? Well, one way they're concerned is about training men to be good husbands, because then they'll take care of their wives, and the wives will be happy, and the children will have good mothers, they'll have good families. And so in general, society protects women from being exploited by men, and it offers them all the support and facility within the family situation so that they can raise their children in a healthy environment. So that's considered very important, and the point he's making is that because the service with that duty is important, the society protects women because they have an important service. Just like, you take a king or a president, they have so much facility because their service is important. So women in Vedic society were given facility, a lot of facility, extended families, care from the elders, so they could do their service. Okay, by Krishna's natural arrangement, the female body is equipped to fulfill these roles, which demand in their own way as much competency, resourcefulness, and dedication as do the services traditionally assigned to men in a Vedic society. When the value of their roles is duly recognized and appreciated, competition for the latter's role or for the form of respect offered to them is rendered meaningless and unnecessary. I'll read that again. When the value of their roles is duly recognized and appreciated, competition for the men's roles or for the form of respect offered to men is rendered meaningless and unnecessary. No, they're not competing with men. They don't feel the need to compete with men. Men are men and do what men do. Women are women and do what women do. Today things are different. We're talking here about a traditional system, but we're trying to understand why these things are stated this way in the Bhagavatam. At the same time, we understand the principles and we see how we can adapt or apply them in our culture today, or if they're applicable and to what degree they are. And in many cases they are. It may look different. They come out in a different context. But the principles, these principles work in most cases. Okay. We find this spirit also in Srila Prabhupada's personal example. Although he spoke quite candidly and openly about the myths of women's liberation, in all of his dealings with the Matajis, he trained us to see the women as mothers, deserving the highest respect. He treated them with the utmost dignity and respect. In other words, in all his dealings with the women, he treated them respectfully and he trained his disciples to be respectful. So he was not in any way denigrating women. It was unthinkable for him to neglect women as insignificant or secondary. What to speak of minimizing or exploiting them? Actual protection and dissemination of Vedic culture calls for imbibing this spirit. Bhakti Carol is asking, why are we interested in the importance of position? Well, I think the way this conversation developed was that a question was asked by a woman, that why does it seem that women in the Bhagavatam are taking secondary roles or being looked down upon in some way? So Ramapada Swami was saying, within the spiritual world, position is not important, because everyone has a perfect relationship with Krishna, whatever position they're in, they're happy with. And similarly, within Vedic society, roles were more clearly defined and followed, and people generally were not feeling, if I'm in this role and someone else is in another role, which is apparently a higher role, then my role, I feel uncomfortable in that role and I want to change it to a higher role. They didn't think that way. There was hierarchy, but even though there was hierarchy, people didn't feel that they were necessarily inferior, but they felt that they were just acting according to their dharma, their guna, the qualities, and their karma, their nature that they inherited at birth or they developed. So if you're in touch with your nature, if you understand what it is, you can be satisfied doing what is your dharma. But if there's a feeling that someone else is doing something better and I should do that, then you'll be dissatisfied with your dharma, or you'll think your dharma is to do something else. Like in the Vedic society, the Brahmins were the highest. So then if you were a Shudra, which is the lowest, you may think I should be a Brahmin because a Brahmin's higher, and I am not happy being a Shudra. I want to be the highest in society. But the thing is that in traditional Vedic society, the Brahmins didn't think they were better and they didn't put down the Shudras. That came later in Kali Yuga. So naturally, if you're being put down, then you either want to get to a higher position or you want to pull the people in the higher position down. And often what happens is when the people in the higher position put you down, you get in the higher position, and because you've been put down for so long, when you get in the higher position, you tend to put down people below you, kind of like you get back, or you're doing what was done to you. So the whole thing's a mess. Whereas in a social system in which people are happy doing their service, doing their dharma, their duty according to their position, things work better. Just like Arjuna, the whole Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's trying to get Arjuna to act according to his position, and Arjuna's saying, I'd rather renounce. I'll live like a Brahmin. And Krishna's saying, no, you're not a Brahmin. It's not going to work. So it's true, we're really not concerned with position. We're not supposed to be. But you can see in your own life that sometimes a person who is more qualified than you in certain areas, you may become envious, or you may it may make you feel bad that you're not that. You might start thinking, oh, I'm not that good. Something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm not intelligent enough, or whatever. You might develop some kind of lack of self-confidence or inferiority complex or whatever, just because you're around someone who's better than you. But you may be suited to do something that other person can't. But society is saying, well, the thing that you're good at is lower than the thing that he's good at. But that really is not the way Varnashram works. And I think we can apply those principles in our own life in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we can become very dissatisfied when we see people who have qualities that we don't have. We can feel very bad and oftentimes become envious just because this person is good at something. I mean, it's kind of stupid to be envious just because someone's good at something, isn't it? But often that's all it takes. Or somebody is just in a higher position somehow due to their karma, their birth, and we become envious. And it's really foolish. So I think Vedic culture takes care of that, because people, I think they're more in touch with their nature, and society helps that and fosters that, and therefore people more easily accept it. Like a lot of times you'll find in Vedic times, certain families, they maintained a position in the Varnashram system for generations. So it was natural. These were kings and their sons were princes. And someone who had been in a Shudra family generally would not be envious of the king and think, well, why is this prince going to become the king? Why not me? But it was just, they were born in that family. They had the qualities they were of a king, and they were trained. And someone is born a Shudra. Shudra actually means many things. Artist, it means actor, it means musician. So let's say you love to act, or you love to paint, you love to make music. So by Vedic standards, you're a Shudra. So it would be kind of stupid not to do that, because you're thinking, well, I'm a Shudra, that's an inferior position. I should be a Brahmin, or I should be a king, live in a palace and rule people. But they didn't think that way. This is what they liked to do. That was their position. And it said the Shudra's nature was to serve. So they could be happy serving. They didn't have a lot of independence and pride and a lot of wealth. But they could do what they needed to do. Just like in our society today, a lot of artists have to be supported through foundations because they can't do what they want to do unless they're supported. So just think in a Vedic society how nice it was. If you're an artist, the society could take care of you and you could work in that way. That's wonderful, I think. So, okay, let's see. Where are we? Okay. Nancy is here. Nancy is... Whose friend is Nancy? Says... No. Nancy. My friend Nancy. Oh, it was Kremlin's friend. Okay, Nancy, welcome. I'm so new, I have to watch first. Okay. So, Christ gave a good example. Kremlin says, Christ gave a good example of washing the feet of his disciples and said, whosoever will be great in the kingdom must be a servant. Yeah, Krishna did that also. And didn't Christ say the last will be the The last will be first. The last in this world will be first in heaven. So that's our philosophy. Krishna consciousness, the lower you feel, it means the higher you are. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? The less you think of yourself, it actually indicates the greater you are. And the greater you think of yourself, it indicates the lower you are, actually. But I have found that this principle of being envious of others, I mean, there are really two things if you look at it. If someone has something that you really appreciate and you don't have it, there's two ways you can go. There's two turns you can take. One is you can actually appreciate it and think, this is wonderful. I really appreciate the fact that you have this ability or these qualities or this degree of intelligence or talent. Or you can look at it another way and say, I wish I had it, and I'm really envious of you or jealous. And if you take it further, you may want to pull them down and somehow or other push yourself up because you're so insecure that you don't have it. And you know, psychologically speaking, we can see how these insecurities develop, and people think, well, I'm not good. But Srila Prabhupada said it nicely. It's kind of funny. He said everybody's good for something. Because I think one devotee was coming to him and saying, feeling that he didn't really have any qualification. It was kind of useless. And Prabhupada said, no, everybody's useful for something. So in the broad scheme of things, within the context of society in ancient times, when we had these so-called class distinctions, which were not competitive class distinctions, but they're distinctions based on people's nature, and it was easy for people to accept their nature and work in a way and be satisfied, then you wouldn't have these issues. I'm envious of the Brahmins. I'm a Shudra. You wouldn't be envious of the Brahmins. You'd appreciate the Brahmins. The Brahmins are helping you. The Brahmins are teaching you. And you get to serve the Brahmins. And that's wonderful service. So that's different. That's the difference. Okay. So the goal tonight is to become the lowest of the low. Not to become. We already are. But to realize we are. How's that? The goal is to realize that we're actually low. At least to realize that we're lower than we think we are. Maybe we won't realize how low we are, but then naturally then someone thinks, but if I think I'm low, then I'm going to develop all these complexes and I'll lose my self-confidence. Won't be able to do anything because I think I'm just low. But if we take it from the spiritual point of view, where the low is the high, we're just talking about being real, because sometimes it's said humility just means reality, just to acknowledge where we're at. And by acknowledging that, that's a great spiritual position. So we actually become elevated by acknowledging that we're not elevated. Does that sound like a Buddhist aphorism? You become elevated by thinking you're not elevated. Think about it. It's true, isn't it? And thinking that you're elevated, you become degraded. And that's totally divorced from any idea of self-esteem or self-confidence. That's a different thing. And a devotee, in a sense, can be even more confident because Krishna's working with him. Or Krishna's working through him. So he has confidence in Krishna's power. Right? Even if I feel that I can't do it, but I have confidence in Krishna's power, so I may be very confident in what I do. Okay, so Nancy, Bhakti Carol said Nancy, all right. Okay, so let's go on. We're going to read a little more. Is everyone paying attention? 1, 2, 3, pay attention. Okay. Artificial attempts to create equality are bound to fail. In our attempts to negate the disparities and injustices found in this world, we seek to homogenize everything, not much different from the impersonal school of thought which aspires to make everything zero. But such a conception of equality is unnatural even in the spiritual world. Okay, so what is he saying here? He's saying that equality is artificial because we're all different. Okay, equality spiritually, all right, but materially, we're all different. In our attempts to negate the disparities and injustices found in this world, we seek to homogenize everything. So, how are these injustices caused? Because someone who is in a superior position takes advantage of someone in an inferior position. So we want to homogenize everyone and everything and say, no, we're all equal, we're all the same, and in hopes that no one will exploit anyone else. But he's making the point that, well, that's what the impersonalists say. They say everything is one. Devotees say, no, everything is not one. There is variety. There are differences. We're not the same as God. God's not the same as us. I'm not the same as you. You're not the same as me. We're all individuals. Our expectation to find such uniformity in the pages of the Bhagavatam leaves us disappointed and amounts to imposing our limited material conceptions on spiritual reality. Real equality lies in acknowledging that there are indeed differences in the natures and capacity of different classes of living entities, and facilitating optimal engagement of everyone in their natural service to the Supreme. So that's the end of that. So, I have a request for you out there. Please keep the chat to the topic. Now, I have a really interesting topic here, and the women are really going to like this one, because this is about how bad men are. So now that probably woke you up, right? Okay. I actually wanted to read this in the beginning. It doesn't relate to what I just did. If anybody has any questions on what I just read, it seems like no one's paying attention, but if you have any questions, question or comments, question now, because we're going to go on to something else. Okay. Nityananda Chandra says, I heard this example for those who are familiar with Ayurveda in regards to women and men. Ayurveda, one may be Kapha, Pitta, or Vata. Not one is better than the other, just different. Yeah. Everybody's got their nature. Obviously, if everybody were the same, this world would be kind of lopsided. But the fact that people are different balances things out. Just imagine if everyone in the world were like you. In some ways, the world would be better. In some ways, it would be worse. In some ways, people would be, we wouldn't be seeing things. So that's a good point. Everyone has a different nature. Doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just different natures work together. There's actually books about this. They say if you're going to form an organization or a group, you need different kinds of people. You need the analytical people. You need the creative people. You need the practical people who will just get it done. You need different kinds of people. If you've just got the very creative people, then nothing gets done. If you've just got the practical people, everything stays the same. If you don't have the analytical people, then the creative and practical people may be going right off the edge of a cliff. So you can see how you require all these people. And just look at any company. You have writers, you have accountants, you have business people, you have creative brains, you have practical people doing practical things, you have the mathematical minds of the programmers, and so it all works together. So it's all good. We're all one big happy family. Give everyone a hug out there. Tell them you love them, and everybody's good, especially when they're engaged in Krishna service. Okay. Yes. So Bhakti and Carol is saying Krishna has a unique relationship with all of us, and every living entity is satisfied with that unique relationship and generally wouldn't want any other relationship. And that is, it goes against that jealousy, envy consciousness. Because jealousy and envy means I'm not satisfied with my relationship. I'm the relationship you have with Krishna. But devotees don't think that way. They may think you're serving Krishna better than I'm serving Krishna. I want to serve Krishna as nicely as you're serving Krishna. But they don't want to take your position. Okay, so it's a very interesting topic, because as you study nature, and Prabhupada said if you study nature you can get your complete education without going to school. So he said you study, he didn't say, but if you study nature you'll see what exists within this world is there's hierarchy. Some people are higher, some people are lower, some animals are higher, some are lower, some people are smarter, some people are better at this or that. So hierarchy exists naturally. Even if you say let's make everything equal, but still there's a natural hierarchy. And so you can't deny that. You can't get around it. It exists. So in Vedic society, it just everyone acknowledged that and then used it to create a symbiotic relationship between all members of society in different positions. And the really nice thing about Vedic society, which we don't have today, is that you had Brahmins. And what was so special about Brahmins is Brahmins were detached. And what does it mean to be detached? Well, Brahmins were not motivated to gain anything for themselves, either materially, neither to gain any form of respect or prestige. So when you're in that position, you are able to see things clearly, because when you're attached to something, you don't see clearly, you don't see objectively anymore. And when you're that detached, you can work for the welfare of others, because you're not at all motivated. And they advised kings, so because they weren't motivated, they didn't butter up to the king, so the king would drop a few gold coins in their pocket and just say what he wants to hear. But if the king was off, the Brahmins, because they're detached and they feared nothing, they had nothing to lose, they would tell the king, "You're off. You're exploiting the people," or whatever. In any way, whatever way they were off. So that was kind of like the stabilizing factor, because if you talk about hierarchy, then in the back of your mind, or the front of your mind, or the middle of your mind, you think, well, there's going to be exploitation if we acknowledge that these people are higher and these are lower. But when you have Brahmins there, they don't allow the higher to exploit the lower. The problem is when the Brahmins become corrupt, because they're the head, and so they're the watchdogs. When the watchdogs become corrupt, then you have problems. The kings tend to be corrupt, especially in this age. More so. Not so much in previous ages, but this age especially. So the Brahmins were there to keep them in line. So therefore you could have hierarchy, at the same time no fear of exploitation, because the head of society was guiding and guarding. That is wonderful. If you think about it, you just think about that, how wonderful that is, to have a body of detached people who have no personal motive or interest and no hidden agenda. Their only agenda is the welfare of the citizens. That's all. And they guide the kings. And the kings subordinate themselves to them, because the Brahmin's vision is pure. The king's vision may be tainted by the desire for power or some other desire. So it's a really wonderful system. So, Spiritual Sky has come on board and has something important to tell us. Oh, he has a question. How can, speaking of animals, who was talking about animals? You guys are talking about animals in the background. We weren't talking about animals. Oh my God. What's going on here? How can I help my dog attain spiritual advancement? She hears me chanting. If your chanting is pure, she'll make more advancement. I also anoint her with blessed Ganges water. That's good. Offer her prasad. That's good. A senior devotee who's an artist told me that the owners of pets are responsible for their spiritual advancement. I never really thought of that. I thought we were just responsible to keep them alive. If you say Haribol, she will give you her paw. I taught her this. So it sounds like you're doing a good job. Just don't get too attached. Otherwise, you know what happened to Bharat Maharaj. So it sounds like you're doing good, but it's really... I was actually serious when I said if you chant purely, because the more purely anybody chants, then the more benefit the people who hear that person get. Because there's a difference between the chanting of someone who really doesn't have feeling and devotion for God, and the chanting of someone who does. And it comes out because the heart is coming out through the sound. Just like, if somebody sings and they're really into it, you really feel it. And so the same is there if someone's chanting purely, you really feel it. They feel it, and that's why you feel it. So, spiritual sky, if you chant with feeling, your dog may even start dancing. Maybe that's a test to know if you're really chanting well, that what happens to your dog. If ecstatic symptoms are exhibited, where your dog's hairs are standing on end, and he's shaking and shivering and rolling on the ground, chanting Haribol, then you know you're really chanting well. But if you love your dog dearly, then you should try to chant better, because your dog will benefit. How's that for an answer? That was pretty good. Okay. I mentioned, he was talking about animals. Yeah, I mentioned nature and hierarchy in animals. Yeah. Somewhere in the Shastra it says you can learn things from a dog. Who knows what you can learn from a dog? Oh, Spiritual Sky says, I would not mind coming back as a beautiful German Shepherd. Yeah, someone said that to Prabhupada. Who knows what Prabhupada said? Because Prabhupada was saying, if you live like a dog or think like a dog, you become a dog. And then Prabhupada said, no, there's a difference between human life and a dog's life. And the person said, well, it seems like the dog's life's pretty good. And Prabhupada said, oh, okay, I bless you to become a dog. So you better watch out, Spiritual Sky. You could become a dog, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, even if I become an insect, I would like to take birth in a family of devotees. So that's the main thing, get association. But our aspirations become the dog of our guru, dog servant of the guru. So if you have the tendency to want to be a dog, become the dog of your guru, and run behind his lotus feet, chanting Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Okay, let's think. And Nancy wants to be a horse. Whoa. Watch out. Krishna fulfills all desires. Yes, only a human being can awaken his Krishna consciousness and attain eternal life. So, animals are better. Yeah, Prabhupada said that. He said humans are having abortions, animals won't kill their own children. So we become worse than animals. And what, the dogs don't judge you? They're not envious? So Prabhupada said we could learn from the dog. Yeah, so maybe we can learn from the dogs how not to be, that we shouldn't be envious. We can learn how to serve the master faithfully. Always be affectionate. Another thing it said that you can learn from the dog is how to wake up immediately when you're woken. There's many things you can learn. So if you have a dog, then you can observe some of the traits of your dog that would be helpful for you. So that would be better than becoming a dog in your next life, but learning from your dog how to be a better devotee. How's that? Is that good? Okay. I wanted to read. Can I read something now? Some statistics for you. For those of you who came late in the beginning, I was saying how it seems in Kali Yuga, more than talking about women becoming chaste, women being chaste, we should talk about men being chaste, because they tend to be more unchaste than women. So here's some statistics. I hope you're all sitting down. This might shake you up a bit. There's this organization called Promise Keepers. Probably most of you know about it. And Promise Keepers are... I don't know about Promise Keepers once you're married, but I could imagine Promise Keeper means once you're married that you remain only with your wife or husband, and you're very dedicated to your family. And Promise Keepers, before they're married, they practice celibacy. They take a promise to be celibate before marriage. So there was a So here's some statistics. It was a Promise Keepers Convention. They asked the men, these are men who either have or are promising to be celibate or promising once they're married to have never ever engage in any connection with any other woman than their wife. So they asked them at this convention, they said, how many of you have seen pornography, have viewed pornography in the last month? Who could guess how many Promise Keepers? Because you'd think none of them would. They're Promise Keepers. Does anybody know? Or anybody want to take a guess? How many of the men, what percentage of them do you think said yes? Anybody like to guess? Spiritual Sky, he gets a gold star. He's absolutely correct. 1 gold star for Spiritual Sky. Yeah. And Kremlin said very high. You guys already know these things. Okay. Now, 50%. 50%. Now, gets worse. Then what they did, they just asked all the men who were Promise Keepers. God, this is scary. 65% of the men in Promise Keepers admit to a pornography addiction. That is scary. That's not just looking at it. That's an addiction. So, yipes. Things are pretty bad out there. Now, another question. Rapes. What percentage of rapes are done by men, committed by men, and what percentage are committed by women? Who knows? Anybody want to take a guess? So if you don't know, take a guess. We'll see how close you get. What percentage of rapes have been committed by men? What percentage committed by women? Anybody want to take a guess? Everyone's in a state of shock. Nobody knows. Kremlin says probably 90%. How many agree with Kremlin? 90% rapes by men. Now, unfortunately, I have statistics, but not unfortunately that I have them, but unfortunately, I don't know where they came from, so I can't say. The statistics I have are a little higher than 90. Actually, a lot higher than 90. They're 100%. That women don't rape men, and they don't mess around. It's not that women aren't wired that way. So, who really needs to be chaste? It seems like the men have a lot harder time than the women. So, we can start talking about chaste men. Yeah, it's about control. A lot of men are out of control. 50% of married men and 42% of married women will have an affair at some point in their marriage. So the men are still ahead. They're cheating more than the women. Okay, is this depressing news? Okay. That's enough of the good news. So, would you like, let's see what time it is. We have 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions or discussions? Because we can discuss what we've been discussing, or we can go on to something else. I have another article for you. So, all you guys out there, hopefully that will humble you a little bit. That, and we like to think we're special or something, but we are special in a bad way. So at least be aware of that, if you're not already, and don't be so inclined to think that you're better than women. Because in this area of sexual control, men are really the ones who need to work on it, much more than women. Okay. Yeah, as I said, I don't know the details on this 100% rape thing. But okay, let's say it's not 100%. Let's say it's 90 or 95. It's still, we get the point. Okay. So, I have another article, and it's called Women's Intelligence. Who would like to hear that article? Raise your hand. Or I'm just waiting if you have nothing else to say about what we've been talking about. Then we're going to go into this. This is an article by Bhakti Vidyapurnaswami, and this is the Vedic understanding of the difference between men's intelligence and women's intelligence. It's very interesting. Okay. Prema Seeker, can you comment on Srila Prabhupada's statement about women being more lusty? My understanding is that means... I'll tell you a story. Do you want to hear... Should I do what Radhanath Swami says? Do you want to hear a story? Should I tell you? Of course, I wish this was set up so like you could talk to me and I could hear you. Maybe we'll get it together. Like I could see all of you in your bedrooms, on your computers. Little faces all over, and then you could talk. And you could talk to one another. That would be nice. So, Prabhupada was walking in a very nice neighborhood. Beautiful homes, large homes. And so he was saying that. He said, why do you think there's all these big homes? And Prabhupada said, it's because of the women. He said, a man who's not married, he can live in like a simple hut and be happy. But once he gets married, there's the wife, she wants the home, the big house, all the furnishings and so forth. He said otherwise, the man would be happy and he wouldn't, and number one, he wouldn't be working so hard. He doesn't care to work that hard because he's happy living simply. Most men. So, when we're saying lusty, it doesn't necessarily mean lust as we might think of it, like a gluttonous lust for food or sexual lust. My understanding is it's just the word in Sanskrit for another word for woman is stri, and stri means one who expands. So women are more, if you want to use the word lustful, it's probably not the best word, but for the nice home, the nice children, the nice furnishings, nice food, that they're more inclined to these things in general, the nice clothes, jewelry, and so forth, than men. That's what it means. So when the man and woman come together, the woman wants a lot of things, but the man doesn't. I don't know if I was telling you last week, I was in a place where it's basically all men. And just by walking into the place, you could tell it was just men, because there were mismatched chairs and mismatched curtains, and things could be clean. It's like when the woman comes in, it's like a woman came in there, she could like spend $10,000 immediately to fix that place up. But the men are like, yeah, whatever, it's like they don't even notice. It's like, so what if the carpet doesn't match the curtains, doesn't match the walls? And so what if, we have 6 different styled chairs and we only have 6 chairs? I never really noticed, But a woman will come in and she'll just look at, there are men who will, I'm just kind of taking it over the top, there are men who would also, but generally a woman will come in and she'll look at that and it's put her in anxiety. I can't look at that, it doesn't match, You've got to do something. So, that's my understanding, Nice home, nice food, nice clothing, jewelry, children, those are just like the inherent needs for women. So that's my understanding of the word lust. Lust is that's the English translation of a Sanskrit word that may have more subtle connotations than what we think, of the word lust. So, and then Nancy's saying, well, not true in the Philippines. What's not true? women are more well behaved, or they're more simple, or okay. Women are more influenced by the culture of consumerism. Yeah, definitely. Depends on the culture, how she's raised. Yeah, in general, I think go to a mall and count the number of stores that cater to women, and count the number of stores that cater to men. Let me just think about it. I mean, I counted one day. I walked through and I counted. There are very few stores that cater just to men. And I think all the stores that cater to men also cater to women, but there's a lot of stores that cater just to women. Jewelry and clothing and shoes. So, that says something. It's a general tendency. And of course, you'll always find exceptions, and cultures will have different exceptions. Catholic cultures, a lot of women want to become nuns, and Buddhist cultures, a lot of women become monks, or I don't know if they're called monks, what they're called, but so that's also culturally influenced. And you even have brahmacharini ashrams, traditionally in India they've had. Okay. So Carol's saying men make bigger purchases. Yes, they buy the cars and the big TVs, and they also make more money. But I still think that women end up spending more money in the long run. Because usually if you're making a bigger purchase, generally you probably are saving for it, and think you're not just buying a lot of little things all the time. So I think it's a lot of those little things that really keep the economy going. So from the economic point of view, it's good. Everybody's buying and buying and buying. From the Krishna conscious point of view, it's not. And from the Krishna conscious point of view, it's also good for women to control their tendency, their consumer, or all of us to control our tendency to be consumers. Because we buy things we don't need. And that's not exemplary. It's not symptomatic of someone who's Krishna conscious to buy things they don't need just because they have money. Or rather, that money could be used for spreading Krishna consciousness, helping other people. I mean, I like to think that way when I see something that I want that I don't need. I think, well, that cost this amount of money. What could that amount of money do? Could use it to protect cows. We have many cow protection programs that are needed. You could use it to help print literature. That's always needed. Could help support a temple, a project in a temple. I mean, there's prasadam, food distribution. There's so many ways it could be used if you just were more controlled. So the idea is that if you have money, you should know, well, how much do I really need, and then live more simply, if you can, and then use that extra money for a higher purpose. But the consumer in us is thinking, wow, if I give that donation of $100, that means I'm not going to get this other thing that I really want. But that's good. It's good not to get what you want. It helps you. It's an austerity. I mean, think about it. You really want something, you don't get it. It empowers you, it strengthens you. You've done something to control yourself. And it becomes that much easier to control yourself the next time. And spiritual life is based on austerity, doing something that's difficult or uncomfortable for the body or the mind. That gives you tremendous strength. And you should try it. Like tomorrow, for example. You could eat a little less, or maybe you like sweets, so don't eat any sweets. You just do a little something to discipline yourself. It gives you tremendous strength. You'd be surprised how much strength it gives you, and it gives you the ability to do it the next time. And you become more tolerant. Your mind becomes easier to control, and you become more capable of making choices to do things that you may not want to do, and avoid doing things that you would like to do. So that's, you tie that into the consumer consciousness, and you can see how we're not just meant to go out and just buy whatever we want. It's not healthy for us. It really isn't. Even if you have the money. So, well, I can afford it. I can get whatever I want. But it's good to restrain yourself and give that money for a higher cause. And it's powerful. It really is. Okay. Okay, we're talking about gender discrimination because men make more money and if they get the same job as a woman, they'll pay the men more. Yeah, that's obvious. That's there. Okay, Prema Seeker wants to hear Bhakti Vidya Maharaj's Bhakti Vidyapurna Maharaj's article, and Spiritual Skaya only wears prasadam jewelry. Very nice. Everything she offers her jewelry to Krishna. Yeah. Okay. So she says, it all belongs to Krishna, so I thank him for sharing it. No, that's never thought of it quite like that, but once in Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada said, if you want to make your wife happy, you have to buy her jewelry, and you have to buy her clothes, and to give her nice food, a nice house, and children. And then Prabhupada said, and if you do that, the effort you have to make to do all that, you'll go to hell. You'll have to give up your Krishna consciousness to do all that. So there's some truth to that. It's a joke, but there's some truth. So, okay. So we'll read something. We have 2 minutes to read something. I don't know. Should we read it? Okay, we'll give you a little taste because we're going to read it next week. Okay. So the moral of the story tonight is if you buy jewelry, offer it to Krishna. Okay, then it becomes prasadam. That's interesting. Okay. Now this is the Vedic understanding of women's intelligence. The basic element, I think this is a lecture, so if it's going to sound like somebody talking. The basic element is that Vedic culture defines intelligence as memory, knowledge, and power of discrimination. Memory, knowledge, and power of discrimination. Of the three, the most important is the power of discrimination. So if one has memory and knowledge but does not know how to discriminate, to use them properly, that is called inferior intelligence. Properly applying intelligence means using intelligence to understand the ultimate goal of life, to discriminate the difference between matter and spirit. Using your intelligence to understand the difference between matter and spirit, to understand who is God, who is not God, who are you, who you are not, what's the difference between the body and the soul. In everyone there is a right and left side of the brain. Man uses one or the other at a time. So when he uses the analytical, the emotional closes down, and vice versa. So one side is more analytical, and one side is more emotional, creative. Who knows which side is which? Anybody? What's the creative side? The right or the left? Who knows? I forgot. I think it's I don't know, I forgot. Who knows? Somebody out there knows. When you know, just let us know. I'll continue reading. So it's saying the way the men's brains work is that when the analytical side is working, the emotional side, creative side closes down. When the emotional creative side is working, the analytical side closes down. Okay, nobody knows the right and left. Shame on you. You should know. I totally forgot. Shame on me. Okay, a woman uses both sides simultaneously and constantly. So men use one or the other, and women use both at the same time. This gives strength and weaknesses to both sexes. The man's strength is in his ability to analyze within spiritual subject matter. Because when the right side is working alone, it becomes very clear and strong. So the right must be the analytical. So he can minutely understand the finities of the transcendental subject matter without the interference of emotion. But in the realm of emotion, he is at a disadvantage because he's not able to apply his intelligence. Yeah, you never really would think of men that way, right? Men say, oh, women, they're so emotional. But here it's described that when men are emotional, they're totally emotional. They lose connection with their rational side. Interesting, isn't it? Prema Seeker says the right side is creative, the left side is logical. And Bhaktividyapurna Maharaj is saying, seems that he's saying, what's he say? When the right side is working alone, it becomes very clear and strong. So he's saying the right side. So now we have a conundrum. Is it the right or the left? He's saying, it sounds like he's saying the creative side, emotional side is the right and the logical side is the left. That's what he's saying. And Prema Seeker is saying it's the opposite. So, where do we go from here? We'll have to research this again and make sure and find out for sure. Unless, Prema Seeker, you have some source. Okay, it doesn't matter for now. Thus, within the home, sometimes or in emotional dealings, it is not properly utilized. That means the emotions. So the weakness in the home front for men is emotional situations. The woman, because of the mixing of both aspects all the time, is not able to analyze very carefully philosophical subjects because of the mixing of emotional concerns. So he's saying the man's weakness is emotional. He can get overcome by that. And the woman's weakness is that the emotional works simultaneously, which makes it more difficult to analyze very carefully philosophical subjects. But on the home front, like taking care of kids, they can exercise their analytical abilities so they can easily understand how to arrange things nicely for family members, because both sides are working. But for the man, the kid is crying, for example, so he will understand why he's crying, but because the emotional side is not there, he will hand the child to the wife. So women are perfect at home, and in Vedic culture this strength was cultivated. Thus men call all women as mother, because this is where they are strong and have a good grounding and identity, while the man can analyze and guide. You'll see that, married men, you'll know that sometimes the women will just know what the kids need, and you didn't even think of it. You think, I don't think we should do this because this will happen to the kids, and they'll think this and react this way. And you might not have thought of that. So they're more in tune. So now I want to go back and say this is not 100% true for every man and not 100% true for every woman, because you will find women who are very philosophically capable. And you'll find men who are good at home. You'll find men who are emotional wrecks. And you'll find women who are very emotionally strong. So he's making a general principles here. So he's making the point that the way society was organized traditionally, not just Vedic society, but traditionally, as we know, the women were at home because they were better suited. And if men were better suited, then it probably over time everyone would have realized that, and the women would have been out hunting and gathering, and the men would have been home with the kids. But, we've had thousands of years to notice the difference. Maybe we haven't understood the difference, but we noticed who's better at what. So now we're over time. So I think on that happy thought, we should end here. Otherwise, I could fall asleep while I'm talking, which I already feel like I'm talking in my sleep. So let's see what Spiritual Sky says. Well, Prema Seeker says, actually the brain is complicated for science to really know and say right or left. Speculation, okay. The right side may be motor skills, cognitive functioning. I had 2 psych classes, but can't remember. Virgil, Can you have more than one woman? Manjes wants to continue hearing. Okay. I think you're asking, Virgil, you're asking, what? Can a man have more than one wife? In traditional societies, they always did. And the reason being is because the man by nature wants to enjoy more than one woman. But at a certain time in history, the influence of religious institutions decided that wasn't a good idea. What Prabhupada said in Vedic society, usually there were more women. He said, not in Vedic society, but in Vedic times, because there are more women than men were, what was one reason men were allowed to marry more than one, so that every woman in Vedic society was supposed to be married. And if there are more women, then how would they all get married? And he also said the same point I just made, that that's man's nature. He wants to enjoy with more than one woman. Of course, in our society, that would obviously be, it's illegal, plus it would be difficult for most women to do that. And difficult for most men to maintain more than one wife. Because just to maintain one wife and a few kids is not easy. It said it's not easy in Kali Yuga, more difficult than maintaining a whole kingdom. Or like it said, if you can maintain one wife and family, you're like a Superman in Kali Yuga. Super dude. You're a super dude if you can do that. So Manjesh wants to hear a little longer. I guess I have to wake up. Now Nitu has come. Nitu, we've missed you for the last hour. So we're talking about the left brain and the right brain and how women and men function differently. So we're trying to understand intelligence. So Bhaktivedanta Purna Swami is saying men will either function with the right brain fully operational, with the left brain not operational, so to speak, and vice versa. And therefore, when the analytical side is working in a man, it means the emotional side has now ceased to function or interfere, and so therefore they can be more objective and go more deep in understanding philosophy. Whereas women can better handle activities which require both the left and right brain to be working simultaneously. And he's making the point that many of the child rearing and home and duties at home are more suited for women because of that nature. Nityananda Chandra is saying, introducing a lost culture does not generally work. No. And all we can do is understand the principles and apply them. If they're applicable, we apply them, understand them a lot. A lot of times what I find in Krishna consciousness is that some things you don't really understand, or some things you can't really follow. And not that you can't understand it, but sometimes you can't understand them the way they're meant to be. It's like the understandings are. It takes like a very deep, subtle intelligence to understand something the way it's meant to be understood. And so sometimes it takes years and years and years of chanting to finally understand something that either you couldn't understand or that you thought you did understand. So I think that's true in what we're dealing with in looking at the principles in a culture that doesn't exist any longer and probably will not exist in the future. Or a culture that nobody wants to implement in the present day world, but that didn't have the problems we have, and that was successful in ways we're not successful. And therefore the principles are still valid but you have to really deeply understand the principles to know how you would apply them within the context of present day culture. But at the same time, a lot of times when we would tell Prabhupada, well, if we say this or do this, he said, people will not be happy, they won't be satisfied. And Prabhupada said, well, I'm not coming to the Western world how did he say it, to alter our system to satisfy them, but we're bringing a system for them to change. So taking into consideration everything I just said, at the same time, it seems that Prabhupada also did want to change some things. Because from his perspective, he would see a lot of things that just don't work, and he was very clear that they're never going to work because there's some fundamental flaw that needs to be corrected. So in cases like that, he would be very strong. He would be very unpolitically correct about something because he knew the political correct answer was a weak foundation upon which to build a culture. So, to make a long story short, what I'm saying is sometimes it takes a while of practicing Krishna consciousness, studying the philosophy, chanting, to understand the subtleties of these points so that we would understand perhaps later on down the road that something we thought was impractical or something we thought really didn't make sense in the current modern world, we start to see how it really could be practical, it could make sense. And I'm in this discussion, I'm not saying anything that we're talking about necessarily falls in that category. I'm just saying that sometimes it takes time to understand these things because sometimes you hear them and it doesn't make any sense. I think this is like, you can't do this. You can't say this now. People will think you're crazy. This won't work. It's impractical. In many cases, that is true. But in some cases, it means that we don't understand it well enough to know how to apply it. And therefore, we'd probably misapply it, and then it wouldn't work. But if we understood it, you really have to understand the essence on a very deep level. And then you might start to see, this actually could work if done this way. I hope that makes sense. Made sense to me anyway, I don't know. That makes sense to you guys out there? Okay. So I think the point is, when we're discussing these things, we kind of have to, if something doesn't make sense to us, or it seems like it can't be true, or that's what people thought in the old days, but everybody knows it's not true. It's just good to kind of be open to it and don't prejudge it that way. I mean, it may be what you think may be true, but it's better not to prejudge it that way and just kind of be open to it and say, well, what does this mean? As a principle, devoid, a discrete principle separated from a culture that it came from. What is this the principle? And then how well can I understand the principle? And then start thinking, well, how does that apply in the modern context, if it does? And you'll probably find that you'll get more out of Krishna conscious philosophy if you look at it that way, because you'll start to see it more and more how a lot of principles in Krishna consciousness are really eternal, even if the context or the practical application within the Vedic context is not. But the principles, they're powerful. At least that's my experience of being a devotee for a long time, a relatively long time, as a Westerner, because there weren't any Western devotees before 1965, so you don't have to be a devotee that long to be a devotee a long time by Western, being considered a Westerner. So that's been my experience. And similarly, my experience is that sometimes as a devotee there are things that you've tried to do and you've failed over and over again. And sometimes it takes 20, 30, 40 years before you get it, Oh, now I get it. That's why I've been failing. And you'd think, well, why wouldn't it take 2 years? Sometimes it takes that long to finally figure something out. It's interesting, but I have this experience all the time. I go, oh, that's why I'm having this difficulty, or that's why I've had this difficulty my whole life. Now I understand. I never really understood that point that Prabhupada made within this context, or within this application. So that's a pretty common thing that you'll experience as you go on in Krishna consciousness. One day, just something clicks. So in the same way, when we're talking about things like this, one day something might just click and go, oh, that does make sense. I thought that was had no bearing on what's going on in the world today, but now I see this does make sense. So, Spiritual Sky is asking, if it does not apply in the modern context, it does not mean it has to be brought up to date to be PC correct. It will ruin any substance. Yeah. Well, also, I mean, this thing about being politically correct, if you just follow Prabhupada in his preaching, he had no, what's the word? Let's say it the most accurate way I can say it, but he was not, as I said, he wasn't really trying to satisfy people. He was really coming from a place of compassion, and he knew what was right and he knew what was wrong, and sometimes he would say something that was an answer, was a solution to a problem, and it would disturb people because they weren't thinking that way. And a lot of times he just made a point, and he didn't even explain practically how to apply it, but he made the point because people who didn't accept or believe that point were running into a wall and trying to make a solution, which is often the problem, as we see that our solutions are sometimes create more problems than the problem itself that we were trying to solve. And Prabhupada very clearly saw that. So it really wasn't Prabhupada's mission to create, an ancient Vedic culture, but we could say it wasn't not his mission. If whatever, sometimes he would say, we should just use animals, don't use machines. Then they would say, well, we can't do it just with animals. Okay, then use machines. So, he wasn't attached, but he ultimately wanted to see things work out well for everybody. He wanted us to be happy. And he definitely saw what we were doing that was making us unhappy. And he had a lot of ways we could circumvent those disasters, and all those that didn't necessarily make sense to us. But, I mean, even as a disciple, I would sometimes say, Prabhupada would say something, I just think that's not practical. And then 40 years later, I'd go, oh, now I see what Prabhupada meant. How we could apply that. I don't know if that addressed your point, but many churches in Canada have gone underground. Because what? Because they're not applying the ancient teachings within the modern context, or they're compromising them, or they're trying to be PC, or all of the above. Prabhupada's not trying to be PC. I mean, when you're not trying to be PC, people will understand what you're saying. Intelligent people will appreciate it, that you stand up for what you believe. Well, I can't answer Nitu's question. I'm not an astrologer. Yeah, they won't change to be PC. It's a fine line. You don't want to offend people. At the same time, you don't want to cheat people by not telling them what's true. So, Prabhupada said that to be expert, you want to be able to help people understand your point, even if the point is not palatable. And if they go away, then that's your mistake. That's your disqualification. But you want to be able to gradually help them understand. And one of the things about a spiritual master is that they can be extremely heavy because they're cutting through layers of ignorance. But a spiritual master has to be expert how to perform an operation without hurting people so that they run away. So it's and then it's according to who you're talking to and who you are. Because if people don't respect you, then they won't listen to you. So it's a fine line. I mean, you can say things to attract people, but you may not be giving them Krishna consciousness. or you can say things to attract people and then give them Krishna consciousness. So it requires some expertise. So it's a great science, great art, how to, establish what's true and get people to understand it's true without causing them to run away before you are able to explain that it's true. Because like sometimes, one person asked Prabhupada a question about another guru or another yogi, and Prabhupada said, do you want me to flatter, or do you want me to tell the truth? So it was interesting that he said that. Because, a lot of gurus would just flatter, just, try to be nice and kind and loved by everyone. And then, so Prabhupada said, it's kind of like saying, do you want me to be like them, or do you want me to actually tell you what's true? It's kind of funny. Of course, the position of guru is to say what's true. Okay. Okay, so I think we should end. We didn't get through his article. It's 9:22, but that will keep you anxiously waiting next week to hear about the nature of men's intelligence and women's intelligence. And we know men's intelligence is perfectly suited for rape. That's what we concluded tonight, right? 100% of rapes are conducted by men. So that says something about their intelligence. Okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. And thank you for coming. And tell all your friends we're having these bizarre talks about all these strange topics. But I think ultimately this is going to help us. Okay, Hare Krishna. We'll see you next week. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.